All right, let's dive into a really fascinating and honestly pretty mind bending idea from theoretical physics. What if the universe, at its most fundamental level, isn't really made of matter or energy, but of pure information? Think about it. We're all familiar with forces like gravity, right? But what if there's another fundamental force out there that we've just been completely missing? This theory suggests that there's a physical field generated not by mass or by charge, but by information itself. And if that's true, well, the implications are absolutely staggering. So, how do we even wrap our heads around this? Let's ground it in something we all understand. We know that mass creates a gravitational field, and an electrical charge creates an electromagnetic one. Well, this theory proposes that coherence, basically just organized order, is the source of a brand new fundamental force, the information field. It's a completely different way of looking at the very building blocks of our reality. Okay, so if order is the source, how does that actually generate a physical field? Where does it come from? Let's break down the engine that drives this whole process, starting right at the very first spark of organization. It all kicks off with something called the local order parameter, or just O. The best way to think of it is as a kind of coordination score for any little patch of the universe. Imagine a flock of birds. When they're all just flying around in random directions, that score is super low. But when they start moving together as one in a coordinated, coherent way, that O score skyrockets. That right there is the first physical sign that organized information is actually emerging. Now, when that coordination score gets high enough, it creates the very first source for our field, information density. And this acts a lot like gravity. It's a scalar value, which is just a fancy way of saying it's all about the sheer amount of order that's packed into one place. So just like a planet's massive size creates a gravitational pull, a high concentration of organized information creates its own kind of pull. But that's not the whole story. There's a second, much more dynamic source, the information current. Now, this isn't just about the amount of order, but about the flow of that order. It's moving, it has direction, just like an electric current, which is why we call it a vector. So you've got both the static amount and the dynamic flow working together to create this field. So let's put all the pieces together. It's actually a pretty simple logical chain of events. First, you get some local coherence emerging. Then, this organized state generates our two sources, the static density and the dynamic current. And finally, those two sources together give birth to the information field itself, which we'll call psi. It's a really clear path from simple order to a fundamental field of the universe. So that's how it starts on a small scale. But how does this get from being a local thing to a universal principle? I mean, if this information field is everywhere, there have got to be some cosmic rules that govern it, right? How does the universe keep it all from going haywire? Well, the answer seems to be something called the cosmic coherence functional. And the easiest way to think about this is like a master blueprint, or a rule book for all the information in the entire universe. It's this big global rule that basically puts limits on how the field can evolve, making sure there's an overarching logic that governs the whole system. Okay, so we've been talking about these big, abstract ideas, fields, cosmic rules. But now we get to what is, without a doubt, the most profound and personal application of this entire theory, our own consciousness. Yeah, you heard that right. This model doesn't just stop at describing the universe out there. It takes this incredibly bold leap and proposes a concrete, physical formula for what a conscious state actually is. This is where theoretical physics looks one of the deepest mysteries of our existence right in the eye. And here it is, the core idea. This equation is suggesting that our total conscious experience, our psi total, is actually a composite information field. It's a real-time blend of our psychological, our emotional, and our biological states, all woven together into one thing. So our conscious state is this dynamic mix of these three components. The weight of each one, that's the alpha, beta, and gamma, is constantly shifting. You know how it is. One moment you might be totally lost in thought, the next you're overwhelmed by an emotion, and the next you're just keenly aware of some ache in your back. So what's the deal with the number one? Well, it's a rule. It says that while the balance between your psychological, emotional, and biological states can shift from moment to moment, they always have to add up to one complete unified whole. No matter what the mix is, you are always one whole you. This is all just fascinating stuff, but it begs the question. How does this information actually travel and get organized? What's the physical mechanism here?
Well, the theory points to a really surprising answer: the ambient infrared radiation that is literally all around us, all the time.
The first critical rule for this to work is called the homogeneity criterion. Basically, for a system to achieve a high level of organized coherence, the energy and information feeding into it has to be smooth, stable, and consistent. Think of it like a steady, even drumbeat that allows 1,000 dancers to perfectly synchronize their moves. And of course, the flip side is also true. If that energy input is jagged, chaotic, or all over the place, it actively prevents large-scale order from forming. That steady drumbeat gets replaced with just random noise, and all the dancers lose the rhythm. This really highlights why stable environments are so crucial for complex systems to even emerge. What this theory proposes is that the infrared field is actually playing two totally distinct roles. The near-infrared part of the spectrum acts as that smooth, stable carrier wave. That's the background rhythm that allows for coherence to build. But the far-infrared part, that acts as the information band, carrying specific signals that can trigger changes in the system. So we've got these forces that create stability and other forces that create change. How on earth do complex systems like us manage that balancing act? This brings us to the final and maybe the most important concept of the whole theory: the optimal operating zone. According to this model, any complex system can exist in one of three states. At one extreme, you've got total disorder, way too little correlation, just pure chaos. At the other extreme, you have rigidity, way too much correlation, which makes the system brittle and fragile. But right there in the middle, that's the sweet spot. And this is that sweet spot, what they call the optimal correlation regime. It's the perfect balancing point between being stable and being flexible. This is the state where you're at peak adaptability, where self-organization is most likely to happen. It's basically the preferred state for all complex systems, from a single cell to an ecosystem, and, just maybe, to a conscious mind. Which leaves us with this one final massive question. This theory gives us a potential framework for understanding everything from the physics of tiny particles all the way up to consciousness itself. So, if information really is a fundamental field woven right into the fabric of space-time, what other deep mysteries of our universe might it finally be able to unlock?